We're going to move to our first session. The biological business case for supporting women's health is strong, but currently riddled with a whole lot of misunderstanding. So welcome to the stage with me, Dr. Jennifer Weiswolf and Dr. Elevitz. I almost made you a doctor.
Hi, good morning. Oh, okay. That's working. It has a bit of an echo going. I hope I'm clear. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Weiswolf. So happy to be here with Dr. Michal Elevitz. I think it's kind of fun and interesting that we have a lawyer and a doctor kicking off the day here. And I'm not your run-of-the-mill lawyer either. I'm a lawyer who's actually focused on menstruation and now menopause as a matter of public policy, lawmaking, and sort of societal advocacy and change. So I want to actually just kick us off with something I know we talked about when we were preparing for this, our shared belief in research and any sort of advocacy, whether it's public policy or workplace reforms, being rooted and grounded in research and in facts. So I'm going to kick off with just a small question for you, which is, what do we know about women's health, especially as it impacts women's lives in the workplace? What do we need to know to really ground the conversation for the day and for this advocacy?
So let me just thank you all for being here, and let me just say, that's not a small question. So I have this slide that I do about what we know, what we don't know, and what we need to know. And I think the biggest problem in women's health is we don't know a lot, but we also don't know what we don't know. And there's so much misinformation and lack of understanding of what drives health and disease for women. So we're really at this, so it's great to see this advocacy. It's great to see us caring about women and how we change, how we treat women and how we care for women. But I do have a pause. I do have concerns that without having this basic understanding of what drives the symptoms that she experienced, that you experienced, that I experienced, that there's only so far that we're gonna go. So I'd love to see the advocacy, I want to see the policy, but we absolutely need the research.
Yes. Are there any particular sticky points or things that you want folks in this room to know when you think about women's health? And how it impacts women in the workplace across the range. I focus, interestingly, just on menstruation and menopause. I missed some of the stuff in the middle. But curious.
A few things happen in the middle.
A few things happen in the middle, and maybe walking us over that arc a little bit with some science to share with the room, particularly about women in the workplace.
So can I have a show of hands? How many people during their life go back, well, for me, I'm gonna go back a lot of years, maybe some of you don't have to go, missed either school or felt really bad at school or missed work because of your period? Just raise your hand. Okay, so that was probably at least 50%. How many of you think that if a man had to do that, they would only be offered an Advil?
And a pat on the head.
And you'll be fine. So we start with our periods, right? Which, by the way, just to put out the research, the idea that that endometrial lining regenerates itself every month is biologically fascinating. It could advance science in so many ways if instead of saying, oh, that's just a period, we studied it and understood it, we actually might improve how we care for women who have uterine disorders. Let's put the research aside. When you think about from your period, right, from just missing, let's say it's every other month, right? So 6 days a year, you can't function or go to work. Because all we've done with that is we've been very simple in our understanding of it, right? There's what we call prostaglandins that make the uterus contract, and therefore you have cramps, therefore I'm gonna give you ibuprofen or Advil. That's it. That is not at all the totality of what's happening. And if we understood that pain and the pain receptors and what's happening there, we might actually be able to give medication without either saying, fine, don't get your period or take Advil, and it's this kind of all or none approach. Let's move forward a few years to infertility, to pregnancy, right? There's so much we don't know. While IVF is a great resource for those who can afford it and have access to it, we don't explore enough other options about what drives infertility so that we actually can do better for women without expensive, really painful and difficult treatments. Pregnancy. I mean, I could go all day long about pregnancy, right? There's Maternal mortality, we have a crisis here, especially among our Black communities. Women are dying. How is that possible? How are we going backwards, right? Preeclampsia, unique to pregnancy, causes a major leader of maternal morbidity and mortality. You know how we cure it? We have to deliver someone regardless of their gestational age. You know what we did 100 years ago? The same thing. So we've really made so little progress in understanding all these conditions, both wonderful and sad, that afflict women throughout their lifespan, and we're not there. We're gonna get to menopause. So menopause, there's this really flawed study about what hormone therapy does to women. And that flawed study now dictates what all of us think and what we're told. And the majority of it is wrong. It is wrong because of how they did study, but it's also wrong because of the kind of hormone replacement they used. Because the FDA decided for a certain progesterone to be used, so there was no risk of cancer, which, okay, good, but it's actually a harmful progesterone. So all the outcomes of those studies, all the fears predicated on women, you're gonna get breast cancer, you're gonna have worse cardiac outcomes, it's all misinformation because it's not done with insight into the biology, and it's not done with attending to specific sex-specific biology. So we missed the boat. So for decades, we've missed the boat. There's a new drug on the market, right, for menopause, for hot flashes. Do you know how that was found? Hands up if you think it was because there was a study on research in menopause and vasomotor. Raise your hand. No? Good. You would be wrong. Right? It was a serendipitous finding, which is great. It's great that we found these specific receptors, this neurotransmitter in the brain that affects hot flashes. But it's not because science was focused on women. I'll take a breath. I could keep going.
It's okay to keep going, actually. I'm hanging on every word. If there are any particular other sort of science-rooted misinformation that permeates our public thinking and how the workplace in particular, what workplace benefits, what workplace accommodations could address. Are there any that come to mind that are, sort of a specific alignment or misalignment?
So I'll be interested on the feedback on this. I'm a yogi. I do power yoga. I love it. Completely believe that mental well-being helps physical well-being. But I'm going to have to pause and say when we talk about wellness, it's often to check the box, not to specifically deal with the biology or what really affects women. I worry that this approach to, well, just do this, right? If you just go to yoga more, if you just meditate more, if you just are a little more resilient, can we not be any more resilient? I mean, honestly, I think we're all damn pretty resilient. I'm kind of tired of it. I worry that that message is overtaking the message that I can be resilient, you can be as resilient if we want. If someone doesn't understand how our hormonal shifts affect how we can read a teleprompter or how you and I can communicate, we could do yoga 5 times a day, every day, and it's not gonna make a difference. And so I think we need to be really careful on how we frame what we believe is policy and make sure that we're actually tending to the comprehensive biological changes that women have to go throughout their life.
So it's interesting. I think about, so I'm a public policy wonk. I'm a little bit less, and part of why I'm excited to be here today is because I'm looking to be persuaded more on the power of workplace policy. I'm very focused right now, both in the menstruation space and in the menopause space, of the gaps between what we know and what we think we know, and how to fill those. And I worry a lot about anything, whether it's not just about workplace policy, whether it's about commerce, whether it's about maybe public policy that sort of might trade the perfect for the good, and when you do that, when you accept sort of a halfway policy because at least they're thinking about it and at least they're talking about it, but it's not the gold star or the gold standard. So I've been thinking a lot lately, and I'm so excited again to be part of this conversation today, about where workplace policy, which is quite popular, both in terms of the way the media is reporting on it and wanting to talk about it, and we're seeing it happening more and more, even if it's still a small majority of workplaces that are doing it. So I'm getting sort of the long-winded question out here, but where do we see ways to actually now bridge that gap? Will workplace policy be a winner in helping to destigmatize aspects of women's health that have so long been stigmatized, and that's part of the problem? Will it help spur the kinds of research or the kinds of mandates for research that I think we both agree we would like to see? How do we make sure that it does, I guess? Do you have thoughts about that?
I always have thoughts about this.
Okay.
So I think the issue that I have with, so I would like policies that attend to women. I would like policies that make sure that we have the space and the time and the resources to be our optimal selves. I worry that when we make kind of blanket policies, what is good for you and what is good for me are going to be two different things, right? What is good for this group of women and this group of women are going to be different. And so we have to be really careful, I think, in that policies are not, and this is where it's hard, right? Because it's hard to say, I have a policy, but then please see this subcategory and then this little one and then this thing. So I get that that's difficult. I guess part of what I'm hoping with the push for policy, that there comes health literacy, right? I think the majority, I am called all the time from my friends who have something from their daughter having difficult periods or a pregnancy complication, or why are they having all of a sudden anxiety when they've never had it and they hit 45, right? Why are they having panic attacks or palpitations? And I think there is this lack of health literacy and health education among women. And part of that is because we don't know. But it's okay if the information is we don't know, it's still valuable information. And I want that somehow to be incorporated into policy. What I'd love to see, how many business people are in the room? What I'd love to see, right, is the business community understand there's an economic reason to invest in research, right? The more that we know, the more that we can do the right care for women, the more productive we're going to be, not just them, but for ourselves. So there is, to me, always this rationale for a business model to invest in the research that will give us better care for women. And so I know those partnerships are hard. I'm hoping they happen because policy without that will be limited.
Okay, so you just said two words that went off like a great bell in my head. Health literacy, this could be 5 words, sorry. Health literacy and invest in research. And so folks may know that there's sort of a growing coalition pushing for federal policy reform right now around menopause. And the group, Let's Talk Menopause, and Samara's here, although I can't see in the audience where she's sitting. There she is providing sort of the organizing vehicle. And this is a federal bill that is ready to go in the House, but for politics, and potentially on its way in the Senate that will basically mandate a reset in the NIH and require it to examine the gaps that exist in menopause research right now, taking it back to 2002 in the WHI, but even further back, and then requiring that the research commence with a sort of multifaceted coalition of experts helping to guide it. It requires also using currently existing NIH funding to do so. That, to me, is the heart and soul of what is needed to make any reform possible. It will not only change health literacy in terms of the research happening, but change health literacy in terms of leveling the playing field or equalizing what we all know. As you said, people think a lot of different things about hormone therapy based on misinformation, bad information, bad publicity. This is an opportunity to completely reset that, both the knowledge and our perception or our awareness of the knowledge, then bringing that back to investing in research. I am all for investing in accommodations that make life better for employees, although acknowledging that employees means like a crazy wild span of things, right? Employees in an office look a lot different than employees on a construction site, look a lot different than employees who work in a school building and head classrooms. So the idea of investing in research, both and, not investing in accommodations, but investing in accommodations and investing in research is kind of what I came here to say today. So I just got to say it, yay. But I would love to hear actually what your vision or version of that same commentary that I just shared would look like. Does it look different than what I just said? Because I'm super curious.
It doesn't look different. I think I have a perspective, so the National Institutes of Health, right, where there seems to be partisan debate over whether we should advance science. I'm not sure how we got here. I know how we got here. I take that back. Different day, different story. Same story, actually. Right, so the National Institutes of Health drives our science, drives our research. The argument for right now, as they argue for a budget, is to keep it flat. If the budget is kept flat, many of us who do research will actually lose money. The amount that is given to each grant to do research is really not enough to do really important research. So there's been lack of investment at our national level in science. You know, budgets for our postdocs who do a lot of the work hasn't changed in years. The bottom sum of the grants haven't changed in years. So that's just kind of about the science where there's this, seemingly to me, if we're going to talk about advocating for women, every person, every woman, every man should be arguing that we need to invest in science, right? The health of our communities, of our global communities, of our women communities. If our science is not better, our care, our health is not going to be better. So NIH. There are different institutes at NIH, right? There's the Cancer Institute. There's the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, where all the COVID vaccine came from. And then there's a Women's Health Institute. But there's not, actually. So when we talk about menopause, when we talk about pregnancy, we talk about fibroids, infertility, you know where it is? It is funded in the National Institute of Child Health and Development, NICHD. Great institute, great research. Did you hear the word woman in there? You did not. So all of that, all of the stuff that we are talking about today is under that institute. That institute gets 8% of all NIH dollars. So all the menopause that we are talking about is in the institute that gets 8% of the dollars. Of that 8%, do you know how much goes to women's health? About 25 to 30%. So all the way down, you see how little money we are investing in women. And one of my colleagues made this comment. We were actually on a discussion with NIH about this, with the Office of Women's Health Research. And she said, why is the worth of women always tied to our children? Why is there no, not that we don't value our children and not that what we go through doesn't impact them, but how is it that we are not worthy on our own of research and investment in science? And so to me, there has to be the movement to understand menopause and to really, I can tell you what they're going to find at NIH. Very little, right? That's what they're going to find. So there has to be this more global insistence that we do science focused in female and sex-specific biology. Because when we do clinical trials on cardiac disease and don't think about how men and women are different, we don't help women. When we do trials on cancers and we don't think about female-specific or sex-specific differences, we don't advance their care the best way that we could. And so I think NIH and all that has to change, but back to what I said before and to about the different businesses, in so many other things in this world, we don't rely only on that institute and in many research areas to invest. There are so many foundations, really great foundations, that have made a difference for immune therapy for cancers, have made a difference for breast cancer, have made a difference for cardiovascular disease. The investment must come from the businesses, from private, from everything, not just NIH. And I think until we kind of see this as our problem, a we problem, and we have more global investment, we're not going to make a difference.
So I'm going to ask sort of a two-part question of you now, too. We've gone like way off the script, which is really fun, too. I love when conversations get real. and this goes back to, I guess, sort of like not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. If we sitting here together, and I will invite the audience to sort of join into this little brainstorm too, if we were to make up sort of what a three-part, and I just do things in threes, could be four, it could be two, policy, again, I'm using the word policy to imply that we're trying to change the rules and we're trying to change the structures. It doesn't have to mean government, it doesn't even have to mean NIH. If we were to make sort of what the right investment is to get the right medicine, to get the right research, to normalize and mainstream isn't the word, but destigmatize all of the aspects of our bodies and the way they function in the workplace. Let's just focus on the workplace. Society's too big. What would that be? Like, what would those things be? I mean, I've been really hung up on this federal bill because that's what I do. But I'm really
Stay hung up on it. Push it.
And yeah,
Do it.
and we can stay in our lanes too, right? Everybody doesn't have to be doing everything all at once. What would the perfect or the strongest interventions in your mind be, knowing what you know about where the gaps really are? Because sometimes, from where I'm sitting, that's just not always obvious.
So let me just say that I applaud these efforts to move these bills forward, because every time we take a stand, every time we say women's health matters, it makes a difference, right? So part of this is just talking about it, right? The fact that we're doing this, the fact that you're doing what you do, that you do from menstruation to menopause, the more people that talk about this, the more normalized it becomes, which is what we want. We want this to be a conversation so your 17-year-old can come up to you without having to come up with different words and say, this is how my body feels, right? That it's not stigmatized to talk about our period, or that I'm having a hot flash in the bathroom as I'm supposed to be giving a talk, right? So again, it's that health literacy, and it's the talking about it. From a research standpoint, very specific ideas about this. So on one hand, access and knowledge are great, right? So if we have access to care, if we let people know that they should be asking for care, that in itself will make a shift, right? But that shift is limited, right? So as much as you and I can talk about, and we can talk about, if you have hot flashes, if you're having your heart race, or if you're feeling really weird in cognitive function, you should go see your doctor because hormone replacement therapy or something else might be good for you. That's great, right? That's only going to take us to B, right? It's not going to take us to A, because I don't know the biology to get you that other new drug that's really going to change your long-term outcome, that's going to improve your cognitive health, that's going to decrease your risk of getting dementia associated with menopause. So same thing for periods or pregnancy. Having access and changing how we deliver care will make a difference. It's important. But until that investment in biology happens, there won't be new drugs. There won't be new ways that we care for women. And so that to me is a principle, a tenet that we must attend to. So the education, the destigmatizing, the talking, but then really the biology. And to me, those are the two buckets that I think must happen.
And those are pretty much the buckets. And I will say, on the menstruation policy side, sort of from the trenches, that has been a really successful movement. And I'll sort of just give a quick 101, that there has been sort of a live menstruation public policy activism agenda here in the United States, around the world, starting with the premise that for people who struggle either economically or otherwise sort of exist at the margins, being able to manage menstruation is a challenge that has gone under-noticed and underserved. It has sort of translated to public policies that make menstrual products more affordable, that make menstrual products more accessible, that acknowledge that it's just not about menstrual products on their face, but it also includes menstrual education. And all of that has served this broader societal goal of destigmatizing menstruation by not just having the conversations in the media or on social media, but actually having them in the halls of government. And that includes in state legislatures, that includes in Congress, that includes in local community boards and school boards. I think especially in the United States, as we've seen reproductive health and reproductive rights so under fire, that menstrual literacy is a big piece of that. So the idea that we've succeeded or started to succeed in making menstruation a mainstream thing to talk about in state legislatures shines a light on these same people who are now making bills, or introducing bills to affect reproductive health in other ways, including outlawing abortion, and knowing how little they know about our bodies. I can attest to that as somebody who's gone from state legislature to state legislature and heard what they know and they don't know. So I'm really convinced that all of that matters a lot in terms of pushing the needle on not just legal change, but full-on social and societal change. Where menstruation policy and menopause policy might sort of divide a little bit or break off is that menstruation policy can be advocated for by people who know very little about menstruation too, including me. I mean, a lot of the science of menstruation is not things that I've been trained in or schooled in, and I've just absorbed and learned by reading. But menopause is actually different. There is so much science that is known and unknown, and there's such an array of symptoms and therefore solutions that the policy agenda or the advocacy, I'm learning as I go, looks a lot different. So what you've just done is sort of underscore that piece of it, the piece that I think is not just that I'm learning as I go as a lawyer and policy advocate, but that all of us are sort of grappling with. How do we make change when there's so much we still don't know? But we can't just wait for that knowledge to make change, because one pushes the other. It's very dynamic. It's very synergistic. So anyway, I think that's a really great place to start this day and the kind of conversations that we're going to be having all day. What we know, what we don't know, what matters. Nothing doesn't matter, but understanding some of the limitations of the different kinds of advocacy or the different kinds of policies we might pursue when the science remains this sort of unfilled in box, if we're talking about box checking. I've loved this conversation. I'm mindful of the clock here. It's very big from this side. And I want to make sure we have a chance for folks to chime in or ask questions or share a perspective. So given that we have a couple of minutes left on the half hour, are there folks who do want to weigh in? And I don't know if there's a mic that's being passed around.
Here's the mic.
So while people are looking, raise your hand if you want to ask a question. They'll bring the mic to you. While you're doing that, I would just say, so I'm 55. Do you know what it took for the legislation, the reason it matters, on menstrual products for me to actually say, wait a minute, why do I have to have, first of all, a quarter? Who walks around with a quarter, by the way? The fact that they were not accessible, right? That we just accepted that. Like it's actually mind-blowing to me as a scientist, as a doctor, as a mom, as a woman, that was just to show you how pervasive kind of the misogynistic lens of what we've done, right? That it was okay to say, you have to pay to get a pad. And so I absolutely agree that these advocacy and these policy, I think it moves it all along. And yes, there shouldn't be we shouldn't stop till we know everything. It just all has to happen together, which I understand is a big lift.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Kristen. I'm a women's health nurse, and I have a background in business. I want to thank you so much for doing the advocacy for women's health, because even as a nurse, I don't have the support that I need as a woman to take care of women, which is really sad. I was wondering if you could touch a little bit about like prenatal vitamins and how there's not a lot of research in that, and just to speak to that a little bit.
So it's interesting, the research is on folic acid. We know very clearly, and this is where misinformation and a little bit of information goes all back to health literacy. So folic acid, if you have optimal folic acid, the chance of having a neural tube defect or a defect in the baby's spine is dramatically decreased. What gets lost in the translation is you need it for 3 months before you get pregnant, right? Our folic, if you start taking it when you're pregnant, the neural tube closes a few weeks after you find out. So the idea that folic acid, that supplement, is absolutely important. Where I get a little worried that we don't talk about nuances. The rest of the prenatal vitamins, if you're deficient for other gastrointestinal reasons or where you live, sure. But in general, the data is folic acid. And in my opinion, if we wanted to optimize outcomes for babies, we would just talk about folic acid 3 months beforehand. The other vitamins, if you eat a healthy diet, especially in the US, not outside, not globally, there is no science behind it. It's all about folic acid.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Barbara. I'm working sort of at the lactation area of women's health. I wondered, first of all, why we always jump from menstruation to menopause without kind of addressing what's going on with women's bodies there. And also, just in terms of the question of stigma, I know you're obviously approaching a lot of companies for funding. The majority of those are going to be run by men. I'm wondering what has been successful in sort of, like, nobody wants to talk about the changes that come along with menstruation or lactation or menopause. And so how do you get over the oogie factor with the men and get them listening?
I'm happy to actually jump in. I have two thoughts. And so in terms of at least my own focus, it wasn't sort of like a logical jump. I very accidentally found myself as a menstruation lawyer about 10 years ago, and I loved it so much and became so consumed with it that I never stopped. And it was only through my own menopause experience that the light went off that I should be thinking about policies related to menopause too. And I'm kind of a one-trick pony. I think about public policy, and that's about it. I have to join with like broader coalitions to bring, you know, more organizing strategies and expertise to bear, because I know the lane that I'm in. So I'm deeply interested in all the entire arc of reproductive lives, but it's just not where my own, you know, skills or energies have gone. But in terms of that conversation, I know we're at time, but I'm just going to answer this real quickly. So I often get asked, especially when I speak to youth audiences, what it's like to speak in front of state legislatures or governors where I'm largely in front of a male audience who are unaccustomed to talking about menstruation in their workplace, or maybe at all or ever. And I always will say that I find it extremely empowering, in part because I am the one that has all of the comfort and all of the knowledge and all of the confidence, and I use their discomfort to my advantage. I set the exact tone for how we're going to talk. We're not going to use euphemisms. We're not going to laugh. We're not going to fidget around. We're going to say the words. We're going to say what they mean, and we're going to talk about what these policies are. And my goal, too, isn't to force them into a corner or lord it over them or make them uncomfortable. My goal is actually to bring them along so that they realize they're not going to melt into the earth, you know, when they talk about this. And this is not going to ruin their career for talking about this. And it's never not worked. Like, there's never been somebody who couldn't do it, thankfully. And they learn a little along the way. And I will say that, I do this work in a transpartisan way, I guess is the right way to say it. I certainly have partisan beliefs. I always want to have bipartisan and wide buy-in for the policies, and it's been extremely successful to the tune where I've done public writing and public speaking with staunch conservatives. No secret, I guess, my partisan politics, and who have told me that working on menstruation in their state legislature, whether it was on sales tax on menstrual products or making them available in public places or schools or through other public budgets, that it has caused their party, and this isn't recent, I'll put a caveat on that this isn't in the current political climate we're in, but more like in 2018, 2017, when it was still pretty polarized. But that this brought their colleagues along on other gender equity and economic equity provisions that came through the state legislature, such that they had a broader vision and felt better educated or like better representatives for having learned what they did through passing menstrual policy. So I think maybe that answers the question, because that's probably analogous to the business environment, but I actually find it extremely empowering. I love walking in to have the conversation, especially if they're not fully expecting it. But even in all circumstances, I would say it's been universally a positive experience. And I think that we're over time.